Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in British Columbia. His website, icba.ca. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Jordan, our thoughts and condolences to the friends, family, to the 5 people who lost their lives in a horrible construction crane collapse in Kelowna, British Columbia. How often do these accidents happen, Jordan?
Well, it's actually exceedingly rare, and you're right. It's been a heartbreaking week for Kelowna, for construction in general in British Columbia. And we think of the families and the friends and colleagues of those who are lost. It's important that we allow investigations to continue and see what happens, but crane operating, especially when it comes to disassembling them, it is a difficult job, and there's a lot of safety training. In fact, Canada has some of the most stringent safety training in the world when it comes to crane operation, and you can just drive through Burnaby, you'll see several dozen cranes in different spots. But it is a very difficult job, and we're thinking of those folks today, and definitely want to send our love and support to their families and friends, and whatever we can do to help.
And of course, the most important thing now, find out why it happened so it never happens again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like that is precisely the thing. Is what happened. WorkSafe BC is on site. A number of other agencies. They're going to investigate this very carefully. Cranes are complicated pieces of machinery. There's weights and counterweights, and they're very prone to wind. Actually had a long conversation with a crane operator once, and he said the one thing that people on the ground don't realize is how windy it is up there. And the cranes will move back and forth several feet, and there's all those different kind of dynamics. You think of Kelowna on a lake. Was that an issue? All of that needs to be investigated thoroughly and carefully by the experts, and we need to adjust safety protocols and find ways to make sure this never ever happens again.
The BC construction business probably luckier than most across Canada. You didn't really have to shut down during the pandemic closures. How is the business doing?
The business has come back a lot quicker than we expected. So, for 2021, ICBA had expected about a 5% drop from 2020 when it came to construction. That has not materialized. In fact, it's busier than it was in 2020, which was even with the COVID restrictions, was a pretty good year. It's not at full, 2019 speed yet, but there's a lot going on. A lot of new companies starting, a lot of companies growing rapidly, adding projects. So yeah, it's come back a lot quicker than we expected, and we're grateful for that because, of course, those are good family supporting jobs that are being created, and all of these projects, they turn into homes for people or infrastructure that we rely on. Or the shops that kind of give our neighborhoods color. Like, this is important. This is important work that they're doing in construction.
Does the construction industry still suffer from a labor shortage?
Yeah, like many industries, construction does have a labor shortage, and it's really because Canada's going over a demographic cliff. Our workforce is aging. We're not having as many children to repopulate. Immigration has slowed slightly during COVID, so we're not replacing or we're not having the same number of young people entering the trades. But that's not uncommon. If you talk to the folks running healthcare, running care homes, running restaurants, hotels, they're all in that same crunch looking for workers. So all of us, every industry is having to be more creative in how they recruit and retain workers. finding paths, giving flexibility to younger workers to bring them into the trades and keep them. There's a lot of good thinking going into how we continue to grow the workforce, and working more efficiently, trying to find some things there to make it easier.
An engineering company in Ontario is giving their employees $20,000 for home down payments to encourage them to either sign on or stick around. Is it going to get that desperate here in BC?
It could. It's an interesting idea. $20,000, I'm not sure would be enough for a minimum down payment on a house in Vancouver. But there are companies that do this sort of thing. So a couple of years ago, I met with a smaller company, home builders, in Victoria, Sydney by the Sea, just outside Victoria. I don't know, actually, it's probably just called Sydney. The branding is Sydney by the Sea, and it's a lovely town if you've ever visited. But this owner, company owner, was telling me that one of his key four persons was thinking. Wanted to make a long-term commitment to the company. He's a guy that they've invested a lot of time and energy into. And one of the things they did was they were building a development, and they said, okay, work for us on these houses, and then we will work for you on building your house. And kind of helped with the down payment and all of that, and then built that house for that worker. And that worker obviously feels very connected now to that company. I think he's actually even on the path perhaps to purchase that company down the road. It's kind of exciting to see that sort of out of the box thinking. How do you keep your best workers? How do you make sure that they have the housing that that they need? So yeah, all of these things are on the table, and I can tell you companies are thinking of all sorts of different ways to make their jobs more enticing.
Official inflation figures have come out from both the U.S. and Canadian governments, over 5% annually. Is that going to lead to both increased labor costs and material costs?
Yeah, inflation, it's being driven. They kind of go, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the inflation rate or the cost of supplies going up. We have seen lumber moderate in price. It's come back down to earth, which is good. One great thing about the free market system is when there's a commodity that suddenly costs a lot of money, people rush in to create more of that commodity and help moderate those prices. So we're starting to see that in some of these industries. But look, nothing's getting cheaper. I was reading a stat that says homes in Langley, Abbotsford are expected to increase by about 15% in cost this year. It's expensive. It's getting more expensive. And I don't think government has a good handle as to how their policies are contributing to that expense.
Can government policies make a difference?
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, government has dozens and dozens of taxes, permits, fees, restrictions, all of which drive up the cost of housing. Government takes forever on permits. Canada is 64th in the world as far as speed of permit issuing goes. That's not good enough. That's not that doesn't measure up and create a competitive economy. There's lots of ways to cut red tape, which cuts holding costs, which then cut the amount of the cost it takes to build a property. So yeah, there's lots of ways government could help, but it starts with them actually looking in the mirror and being honest, and instead of always trying to shift the blame to a particular industry or to a developer, actually looking in the mirror and saying, hey, we're contributing to this too, and we need to address what we're doing.
You've got an interesting comment that you heard about Vancouver's controversial parking tax if you have a gasoline or diesel using vehicle, maybe even propane or natural gas. They're proposing some horrendous parking tax to sit in front of your house.
Yeah, up to $1,000. So Andy Yan is the director of the city program at Simon Fraser University. And, when policies come out from the city of Vancouver that, to fight climate change, Andy Yan and his predecessors usually are the first ones on board cheerleading these policies and, frankly, not giving a darn about affordability or those issues. That has changed on this particular policy. Yan took a look at commuter data and found that about 45% of people who live in Vancouver drive regularly. But that number spikes as high as almost 70% in kind of working class neighborhoods like Killarney and Kerrisdale. And, he went even further to figure out, who's living in Killarney, Victoria Fraserview, Kerrisdale, those kinds of neighborhoods. And he finds that construction workers, there's lots of transportation, warehousing workers, wholesale trade folks, people who rely on trucks for their jobs. So you ain't moving rebar by SkyTrain. You're not going to be able to carry tools down the street and go work, be able to walk to work. You need a truck. And, if the city of Vancouver decides to charge $1,000 to a homeowner who's already taxed at an unbelievable rate, if they're going to charge $1,000 to park on the street, that's going to be a big problem for a lot of these workers and will continue to drive workers out of Vancouver and into the suburbs. So he's recommending Vancouver rethink it. He says that it's going to have unintended consequences that are not going to be good. And it just continues that, white collarization of Vancouver, I guess. It's a policy that sounds great on paper, but actually is terrible in practice.
Well, Vancouver City Hall so often, I think, treats Vancouver as an isolated village rather than a metropolitan city where tens of thousands of people a day come in to work. But in this case, if those people already live in BC or in Vancouver, that means they're causing less pollution, less use of fossil fuels if they're living close to where they work.
Yeah, that's the theory, and you're right. That's exactly how it's borne out. So, right now I can tell you there are companies in Surrey and Abbotsford and Chilliwack and Langley who will not do work on the North Shore, who will not do work in downtown Vancouver because it's too expensive and it takes too much time to get their staff and supplies there. There are workers. There are companies that recruit workers based on where they live, promising them that they'll try to keep their commute safe. So if you live in Abbotsford, you have the right to refuse work in Vancouver. And many, many do. So, this is a problem for Vancouver. Like, the fewer and fewer folks there are who live in that community or near that community who want to go to that community to build things, the more expensive that labor will become. And, conversely, the more expensive real estate will become because it costs more to build it. So they're in this vicious cycle, and it's another example of a government policy making things more expensive.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, once again, we're hearing promises from the BC NDP government and the federal Liberals of affordable childcare being brought in over the next 5 years. I've heard this affordable childcare promise, I think, for the last 25, 30 years. Is it going to happen? And how important is affordable childcare for people who work in construction?
Well, affordable childcare is hugely important for construction and every industry. You've got to be able... You don't want people to go to work and then find that they're spending 80% of what they earn on childcare. It just doesn't make sense. So, yes, definitely need more of that. You're right, though. The problem is we've heard these promises before. And, right now, there's probably not a child alive who will see one of these spots anytime soon. So, it'll be a whole other generation of kids cycling through the system at a very high cost. The other problem is the BC NDP is hopelessly behind on their old child care promises. I think they were only like 15% of what they had promised to get up and running. And it turns out that it's very difficult to, first of all, you've got to find the workers, you've got to find the spaces, the actual physical places. Very difficult to get all that going. So, very curious. It's a big investment. Of course, it's all contingent on re-electing the federal Liberal government, not once, but twice. That's how many times, that's how long it's stretched out in their budget. I guess it's better than, ignoring the problem. I just wish that they had, would put a little bit more action in place and a little less talk.
Have you heard anything from the federal, provincial, or federal political parties that would make construction more affordable and increase the affordability of homes and building places where people can work?
Not really. Some people would argue that, the reannouncement of the SkyTrain line to Langley, that does open up some possibilities. I think what you're seeing right now is a land rush in Langley City, as companies start to pick up land that they plan to redevelop into higher density, which makes sense when you're talking about near SkyTrain lines. I think, Langley, and Surrey to a lesser degree, they want to be like Burnaby, where they build, major hubs around the SkyTrain stop that they have. You think of here in Burnaby, you've got Brentwood, you've got Metrotown, you've got Lougheed, all of them around a SkyTrain station, and all seeing rapid development and densification. But the truth is, we're way behind when it comes to housing units. There's far more demand than there is actual units. The costs continue to rise. The cost of building these continue to rise, and the government keeps extracting more and more money out of the homeowner. There's a lot of issues before we get to housing affordability. So, SkyTrain was a good plan. Looking forward to hopefully seeing that come to fruition. I think every federal party is going to promise it, though. I don't think the Liberals are in any way unique in that. But as far as a plan to make life cheaper, make housing cheaper, we've yet to see any kind of actual reasonable ideas from any of these government or any of these federal parties.
Is rapid transit still needed with so many people planning to work from home?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, what's the long-term effect of this? I can say traffic has picked up on the highways in the past few weeks. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the TransLink ridership numbers yet. But, you do need to move people around the region. You do want to give people options who don't have cars. So you do want to continue to increase that. The SkyTrain does act as a bit of a spine for the transportation networks. From there you can add buses into various neighborhoods and other transit options. We'll see how that goes. You do have to remember, for example, every post-secondary student in the Lower Mainland is forced to pay for a bus pass. Not many of them were using it because so many of them were learning remotely. They'll all return, though, to school and to class in the fall, so that will see a big swell of commuters again.
Jordan, anything else we should be keeping an eye on right now?
Well, I mean, we need to keep track of the federal government spending promises, specifically the Liberals, who seem to be going from province to province, promising billions and billions of dollars. All that money comes due at some point. It's borrowed money. We're running massive deficits. The debt continues to grow. It's going to be $1 trillion soon. That will reduce Canada's ability to borrow money in the future. It will make it more expensive to pay for all of that. It's just something we need to keep in mind. Another cost, increased cost to taxpayers is the increased cost of interest payments. And we need to be very sensitive to that. So all this money comes due. You can only order from the menu so many times before you actually have to pay the check.
Jordan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association. His website, icba.ca. If you have any questions for Jordan or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.